Welcome to Tea Time with Kotlin Thursdays. I'm Amanda.
I'm Matt Moore.
I'm Joel Vasallo.
And today we're going to talk about OSS, a culture shift. Joel works at Redbox as the manager for cloud and DevOps.
Yeah, so I actually started back in September to kind of help build and transform the automation culture at Redbox. So part of it's working in the cloud environments, how we do our tooling, how we do delivery to the cloud, but more so, also it's kind of to build a culture, very much like we're going to talk about today.
You're not necessarily a Kotlin guy, but you're more into Spinnaker yourself.
Yeah, so I'm part of another community called the Spinnaker community. So for those that are not aware, Spinnaker is a open source continuous delivery platform that initially started at Netflix. Folks at Google saw it and they supported it, and then from there, folks like Microsoft, Amazon, now Redbox and GoGo and all these companies kind of got on the wave and now are actively supporting it. And we, just like how the Kotlin community have your Slack, we have like an open channel where you can ask questions and talk with core developers and get advice. And there's conferences now where I had the opportunity to speak at this past year, so it was a great time. So
Kotlin is my first open source group, and I don't know, I'm kind of like Hank Hill, just like if I like something, I'm just gonna stick with it for however long it's gonna be.
You sell Kotlin and Kotlin accessories. Traditionally, at least, and Matt, you probably see this too, Chicago has been really like a financial and like a healthcare business market, right?
I worked in the financial sector before I came over to Yellow, actually.
Oh, wow.
See? So, and then seeing kind of that culture evolve, because a lot of those companies have been around for, I don't know, ages. Like, I mean, some of these big companies like the Blue Cross and stuff, they've been, I don't know, these companies kind of have been established, and now you see these kind of new companies like Grubhub and also Groupon and stuff like that kind of build up here. It's interesting because now they're also influencing those other markets too.
They are, yeah.
To some regard, right? It's definitely cool to see the growth over time and how the languages kind of shift. Probably it was primarily C# and then or C, and then it went to Java, and then it was to a Ruby wave, and then
there was a giant Rails wave in Chicago.
Yeah. There was a Ruby wave hard here.
Yeah, giant Rails workshop here.
And at the end of the day, it's again, the part of open source isn't so much around, well, open source is not Python, open source is not Java. Open source is really like building that common tool set and as a community supporting it, right?
Yeah.
So that's the biggest thing. So. Yeah, so now I've had the opportunity to go into technically three companies and kind of kick off that culture shift, right? So,
you've done it a couple times.
I've done it a couple times.
Wow,
So I've had a rodeo. Yeah.
Wow. So you're kind of an expert.
Yeah. Well, I mean, ultimately, I love the software and just being able to just have, again, that community aspect is awesome. Open source is great. Open source means open community, but you have to kind of bring that thought process back into an enterprise land. And you're never really going to get into this methodical, like, we are this one culture, right, across the board. But you can definitely try and kind of begin that culture shift within your company. And that's kind of how it actually started. So Spinnaker is a great tool, but there's tons of other tools out there that do this probably the same thing, right? It doesn't have to be Spinnaker. But getting people internally to buy into that concept, it's a lot harder, right?
Yeah.
Getting people to accept that we are going to work on this journey, like a bigger thing of how we deliver our code, and we're going to be using these tools that if we run into issues, we may have to work and contribute back, or pay other vendors. Because
one of the interesting things I found going into open source, some of the companies I worked at, was trying to convince them to adopt that model. It was a little hard at first because they were like, yeah, but it's open source. Like, we don't get support for that, right, officially? And it's like, no, you can have support models with open source, but it's just you can tinker with the software as well. You can change it, make it how you want.
So I always like to put the phrase that open source is not just about the code, it's about an open culture.
Yes.
Right? And I know, like, haha, we got you. No, it's taking that, you can use as many open source tools as you want, but if at the end of the day, that culture of like day-to-day operations isn't open, you run into a lot of problems, right? So initially, when I go into a lot of orgs, you see like, the quality team has their own secret repo. And when you try to access it, it's like, you do not have permission to view this, right? And you're like, well, then why am I going to even bother working with that person, right?
I hate those kinds of silos, right?
It does,
Yeah.
right? And so when everyone kind of asks, it's like, well, how do you do it? I don't have buy-in from my executive leadership to do this. And it's like, well, start with just simple hellos, right?
Yep.
Especially what you notice is you typically have these silos of teams, even within an office, right? The QA team sits in that corner, and the developers sit here, and there's a huge pathway.
Yeah.
Sometimes just walking over saying, hey, I'm Joel. I introduce myself. I'm the developer. Thank you so much for your efforts in testing my code. Do you want to see some of how my code operates, right? Just even like that. Like, hey, you want to get lunch, and I'll show you how this new feature that I'm rolling out. Then they say, oh, I can insert some tests in that, right? And you kind of have that culture and build it, and then over time that kind of replicates, and other people kind of build that culture internally.
Like that's what creates like the best software teams that you've ever been on, right? Just the idea that you're just like sharing things constantly, you know what it is that they're doing. Maybe over time you're like, oh wow, this might help you like do what you're doing faster. I'll show you some tips and tricks. I try to combine those two together.
Sounded great.
I'm going to show you some ticks.
So, no, I mean...
Yeah, don't show them ticks.
And at Redbox right now, what we're doing is we're building a completely open delivery platform. And by that, I mean that we're using the open source tools. So you want to say, hey, how does the tool work? Go check out the source. And the tooling around that is also open. So we've had developers kind of come up and saying, hey, I don't like the way you're doing logging. And then my answer to them is, give me a pull request.
Yeah.
Just how I can write a pull request against their code. It may not ever end up getting merged, but at least it spawns a conversation. You're like, oh, I see what you're trying to do. I have a way better way because I'm a developer and I know how to write in Kotlin or whatever. Let me try and see if I can massage this. Does this look better? Oh, that code is way better than what I wrote, right? So, having that dialogue, having that conversation, opening up issues on each other's projects, it's actually pretty cool to see, especially over time.
It changes the focus in the community to one where you value knowledge sharing, and it sort of puts everybody on a, different people have different skills. Some have been in the field longer than others, but it sort of helps equalize the playing field because it lets everybody kind of join into that, right? You don't have these artificial restrictions and boundaries around who can do what type of thing.
Exactly, yeah. Open source is not going to happen overnight, and open culture is definitely not going to happen overnight. And the fantasy of an open culture across the company is also not going to happen overnight, right? So start small. As I said earlier, a hello is just walking around, getting to know people in the office, getting to know and build that kind of collaboration cross-functionally. Yeah. It's huge. Over time you kind of have this concept of questioning things, and you say, hey, well, maybe we can't do the whole thing, but maybe we can just modify this one piece. Oh, cool. So we have a start, and we can evolve and iterate over time.
Yeah, show them your ticks.
Yeah. Anyone is welcome in the community, whether you're doing actual code changes or you're actually doing tests, even simple tests in the docs, right? Like, oh, hey, you did a typo. Great, now the people don't have to see that typo, right? That kind of drive of, you don't have to just be like this entity to make a change. You could just be anyone and make that change. It's great. So if anyone watching wants to come to any of our GDG Chicago meetups, and if you want to be a part of an open culture, check out Redbox too. We're doing some dope things there.
Yeah, definitely reach out to Joel for GDG or reach out to Chicago CUG or anything like that. We love talking to people. I think our moms didn't tell us to not be afraid of strangers or something. I'm joking. We're really friendly people. Until next time.